the behavior of President Trump towards South Africa now is, I really can't explain it. I find it very, very difficult to understand it. Because we've worked with the Republican Party in the US, members of the party, for over many decades. Over many decades. I'm talking about during the struggle for the liberation of South Africa and the anti-apartheid movement. We worked with leaders of the Republican Party. They're very much on the side of the struggle to end the apartheid system. I remember even when the Comprehensive Anti-Apartheid Act was passed during the 1980s. Remember, President Reagan was President of America at the time, and he vetoed that law. And in terms of the US Constitution, it required that the US Congress should override the president's veto with regard to that law by special advantage majorities in the Senate and so on. And you know, that campaign to override a Republican president, President Reagan, was led by Republican senators. It was Senator Richard Lugar, Senator Nancy Kassebaum, Republican senators who overrode a Republican president. So I'm saying, Sophie, we worked with the Republican Party for over many years. Even as you say that, even when George Bush became president, we worked very, very well. President Bush says to his senator, to his secretaries, U.S. Secretary of State, Defense, and all that, in my presence, he says to them, you people do not take any major decision about Africa without consulting South Africa. And even in the way that they dealt with South Africa about South African policy, it was the same. The Republican president said with regard to South Africa policy also, we don't just impose whatever we wish. We'll discuss with them. That's why you had, for instance, a well-known lady, Jendai Fraser, who became ambassador here, a very senior official Republican in the States because of that relationship. Even so, we differed with the Bush administration on Iran. We differed on their war against Iraq and engaged them. President Bush, we talked directly, him and me, and differed on these things. But there were never any imposition of sanctions because we're differing on these issues. And indeed, I must say, even when President Trump, during his first term, he sent an ambassador here, a very good ambassador, who came, even spoke to me. I was no longer in government. But she was very, very clear that in terms of the things that she had to do as a US ambassador in South Africa, she had to make sure that it was in agreement even with me, whatever the issues were. So I'm saying that for decades we've had this kind of relationship with Republicans, both during the anti-apartheid struggle as well as in government. Why there is sudden this changeover, even with regard to President Trump. I'm saying when President Trump was president for the first term, he insisted that with regard to US policy towards South Africa, his ambassador here, a lady, had to make sure that she was acting in concert with our government. Now, why all of a sudden this 180-degree turn, I can't account for it. It's not typical of the Republican Party as we've known the Republican Party for 50 years. It isn't. And to make matters worse, then to depend on an absolute fabrication, like this thing that we're persecuting the Afrikaners and this and that and the other, they don't even discuss it. I mean, I would have expected it that if they got the information of that kind, they would come. We were with you in the struggle against apartheid. You promised a democratic, non-racial South Africa. Look what we are doing now. So we can then explain ourselves. No, they don't. They take a decision on the basis of a complete falsehood and impose this executive order and all of that. But I'm saying is I honestly don't understand it. I agree with the position that our government has taken, that it should directly engage the Trump administration. I think that is very correct. Maybe in that engagement we'll come to know what is it, what has changed. Because I'm saying, so it actually is a radical change completely out of the blue with regard to the behavior of the Republican Party in the US towards us. It's a radical change overnight.